impartial hearing and had your say, and that the judge was listening to what you had to say. But again, we're making decisions in law, and hope you understand that.
Well, one of the things, though, and probably one of the most unjustified criticisms of the justice courts, because people are unaware, but there's been a money grab in New York State for years now, and the money grab continues to grow larger and larger and larger. So if I walk in on a stop sign violation, for example, I may go in and plead guilty. I plead guilty to the stop sign violation, and let's say you impose a fine of $50 or $100. And I think, well, you know, that's probably right. And the next thing you know, you're imposing a penalty assessment of another $85. Right. The $85 isn't something you're doing to punish the defendant, correct?
No, that's correct. It's a mandatory New York State surcharge. And we, again, I want to take this opportunity to say that we as judges take offense sometimes. We can't say it out loud, but we're becoming another major money collection agency for the state. We're concerned with dispensing justice, not collecting money, but it seems like we've become a major part of the state's effort to raise funds. And as you just mentioned, I remember when we had no surcharges, and then it was $15. And then it was $35, and then $55, and now, as you mentioned, a moving violation, such as a stop sign violation or speeding, it's an $85 surcharge. When you get into the penal law side of matters, you could be paying $200, $230 in surcharges. You get into DWI matters, you're up to $400. So we have some cases, as ridiculous as it may sound, where the surcharge is more than the minimum fine.
They've also, as part of their money grab, imposed something called a Driver Responsibility Act assessment in certain offenses, have they not?
Yes, the court's not involved, but over and above any fines, and I love this because the state is running out of names for how they collect money. You know, we have fines, we have surcharges, we have penalties, we have fees, and now we have assessments.
Right.
And it's the Driver Responsibility Assessment, and it says that if you have and accumulate 6 points on your driving license, you're going to be fined $250 a year for 3 years. And for every point above 6, it's another $50. Now, this applies to even out-of-state drivers. If you fail to pay that driver responsibility assessment, they'll suspend your license, and you're not going to have a license to drive.
The interesting part about those being called assessments, we have a call, I'll finish this thought in a second. They call them assessment for driver responsibility, but they have nothing to do with driver responsibility. There's no mandatory classes, there's no schools, there's no training, there's no education, it's just a money grab.
That's correct.
We have another call. Caller?
Good morning.
Good morning.
On that very subject you're talking of, I have a friend who was driving and she was speeding. She did not try to say she wasn't speeding or anything, but she's from Pennsylvania. And it ended up costing her $300 in addition to the original fine.
That sounds right.
And
why?
I almost called her a liar. I said, I don't believe that at all.
No, it's true. And had she not paid it, even as a Pennsylvania resident, what it would have done was it would have immediately suspended her privileges in New York, and thereafter the Department of Motor Vehicles would have notified Pennsylvania, who likely would have, because they have a similar statute. That's a long, complicated thing. I don't really want to get into.
Agreement,
they do.
Right.
They would have suspended her in Pennsylvania as well, which means she would have been illegal to drive in any state because she would have had no valid license from any state. It's a money grab. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with education.
The average citizen knows nothing about this unless they end up going to court. And then, you know, I would have never had $300 extra on me when I went to court because I had no idea that this policing of the New York citizens was happening, and that's just what I call it, because A, it seems to not have gotten a heck of a lot of publicity and when it was passed, and B, no, I don't remember which governor it was, but the last couple governors up until now have said they weren't going to raise taxes, they weren't going to raise, well, no, you don't have to raise taxes if you raise taxes by putting in little hidden things that nobody knows.
And there's tons of them.
Absolutely. My telephone bill, I look at it and I think, what is this? there's fees for this and fees for that, and granted, they're not big, like this fine thing is big.
Well, let
But-
me, it's a great subject. When we talk about the mandatory surcharges, and we just said that it was $85 on a moving violation, I'm going to break that down for you. The first $55 is the mandatory surcharge. Then there's $5 added to what is termed the crime victims assistance fee. Then they add another $5, which is the town and village fee. Guess what that is? That's all we get for handling that traffic.
I was going to say, it's not much.
Then there's a $25 or $20 additional surcharge, and they tell you it's just additional surcharge. So the $85 is made up of 4 different components that they just keep adding another component every year or so to get it up there.
Right, and I just, well, anyway, but that was not my original reason for calling. My original reason for calling is, as a judge, I know there's certain things that you have to, you're mandated by law to sentence somebody, you know, for whatever the crime is. There's some that are mandated, but there's others that you can show kind of discretion.
That's correct.
And in being able to show discretion, like if I would go to you, if I would be up in front of you and have done, I don't know what crimes are discretionary and which aren't, but I'm going to say a discretionary crime, and
Well, we have a certain amount of discretion in about everything.
and let's say my friend who had done exactly the same thing, same circumstance, everything, was before another judge who happened to have a toothache that day. What are the odds? I mean, that means that there's not equal justice for equal crimes. Is that not so? Depending, judges are only human. They're going to have days when they're off, you know.
Well, I agree and I disagree with that. A good judge, you can't go into the courtroom with that attitude. You have to go in with the same attitude each time, and that is with an open mind and an understanding. Most judges are compassionate folks, but we have to do certain things that we're mandated to do, as you mentioned. But when you look at the discretionary side, for instance, a vehicle and traffic matter, there is usually a minimum fine and a maximum fine. Where do you decide within there how you're going to fine an individual? A lot of judges will just make a determination, and usually judges in the same court will agree, but I can't speak for all courts, that if the speed limit was exceeded by a certain number of miles per hour, that our fine would generally be this. And if it's over a certain number above that, the fine would go to this. It's within the discretion of the court, but it's always based on other factors. At least we try to do that. If you plead by mail, guilty by mail, then we're just looking at a plea by mail. Mm-hmm. If you come into court in an arraignment and you talk to us and try to say, well, you know, this happened or that happened, we do. Most judges, I believe, take that into consideration when we look at...
If you're a little old lady as opposed to a snotty-nosed little... Well, I shouldn't say... No, that's wrong. But a little old lady opposed to a
Absolutely. No, you hit the nail on the head. What is justice all about?
Right.
What is justice all about? Justice is trying to help that individual. You know, first they understood they did something wrong, and now you have to pay a penalty of some sort, and it is a punishment. We're not going to.
An attitude, quite often.
It certainly does. The attitude the individual displays in court certainly will influence the court.
Take a warning there, people. Try to have a good attitude.
Yes, correct.
The judge isn't your enemy. Your judge is there to try to see that justice is done, and
it's a tough job, and that's why, to Mr. Subjack's point, you get calls at 3 in the morning, then you go into court and you have to listen to folks and try to understand their situation, and of course they perceive us as being something that we aren't sometimes. If you don't enjoy the job, and I have always considered it a great honor and a privilege to serve my community through this position, it's been very enjoyable for me. But if you don't have that attitude, I don't know how you survive being a judge.